there's lots of learning scenarios out there, lots of different ways of learning. And we're talking specifically about Universe by ViewSonic. And I'm just thinking, do you see that fitting with so many other things in the market?
Oh, absolutely do. I mean, we're in a really interesting time at the moment, because for a lot of children, learning in a particular box is not an option. It's not an option because there's no money, there's no teachers. But actually, just want to learn with other people as well. And flying them over from Sydney to talk about brown snakes, is a bit expensive. But if we can all be together in a room or a space that's not bounded by actuality, that opens a lot of doors up. I remember the very early days of computing. We had some kids with PVC-B, and we connected them up to some scientists in a volcano in Hawaii. And the first question the kids asked was, how fast does lava flow? And the second question was, and how fast can you run? And you knew that at that moment their heads were in that new space, not their old space. And kids love to escape with their learning. So, yeah, it's a great escape route for them.
And thinking about Universe, because I know you've been doing some initial work on that, what is your impression?
Oh, I mean, there are three great things about it, and one thing we need to think hard about. I mean, the first great thing about it is, it's a safer place. There's no bullying. There's a whole lot of things that don't go wrong there. And, for a lot of kids, the tension of the classroom can be quite unpleasant sometimes, So it's an interesting space in that way. Remember, I used to run a project for, 3,500 kids who've been excluded from school by behaviour, and they would have loved to have been in that safe virtual space. And the second thing is, you can be who you want to be. And one of the things we've been doing is exploring body image. And, we've got 2 girls' schools swapping stuff together. We've got a group of guides. We're really interested in, when you can have your own body, you can not have the reality of your body being in the way of your learning. So really, really interesting, I think, particularly we're trying to get girls into STEM and all sorts of places, and suddenly here's a key to that door, But the third thing I think is really quite interesting, and we've built too many limits around who's in the classroom with you. Schools around the world are doing stage and not age learning. I don't care if you're 74, you can come and learn with me because I've got stuff to learn from him. And stage not age, I think, is quite hard to achieve in a school, but it's really easy to achieve in a space like that. And but the hard thing is, I think, and we've seen it a bit with the cinema, what worlds of learning might we imagine now there's no limits on what they might be? So, Universe started off as a classroom, and it's clearly evolving into more than that. But if you just watched Avatar 2 or Avatar 1, or Avatar 3 tomorrow, no doubt, those are worlds that were unimaginable in real life. Now, being a kid wandering around with little nano robots inside somebody's bloodstream, or just an entirely different world altogether, doing, just finding myself on an island. Imagine we just read Lord of the Flies. Let's go to that island right now. Where else might we be is a really interesting question. That's a good question for ViewSonic, What does that look like? And kids have got the imagination to tell you.
And obviously we have a classroom that's a virtual world, or a physical world, sorry, and we have a virtual world. How do you see those working together?
Well, the actual classroom is quite an abstract anyway. There aren't very many places in your life you sit down in rows, doing something for half an hour and then move on. It's a funny old artificial world anyway. So the nice thing about Universe is you can have that funny old artificial world and an infinite number more. One of the things we do, we're not very good at I love schools, I love teachers, I married one. But one of the things we don't do very well is collaboration. I do work, as you know, with elite sports, and if Real Madrid are professor in Madrid, you know, if they win the Champions League, they all go up and get a medal. And nobody says, well done, oh, Gareth, you weren't really trying, mate. You don't get a medal. I mean, everybody gets a medal. Collaboration is a nice thing. We're not very good at collaboration. It's quite hard to organise it, because in a virtual world, it's really easy to organise. And also, you've got the data of who talked to who. You've got the metrics of learning. And one of the things we haven't even talked about is in that artificial world, we've got numbers. You know, we know who talked to who for how long. We know where their faces were focused. We know everything. Now, that's not an intrusion. That's a powerful way to understand our own learning, to reflect on our own learning, do that metacognition thing. You know,
How are teachers in the initial work we've been doing? How are they responding to this mix of virtual?
It's a really interesting question, because teachers started off, I mean, with obviously we're only working with lovely teachers, because they're all people who I know, you know. And they went, oh, what's all this about then, you know, in an interesting sort of way. Curiously enough, we're also working with an adult learning group, and they've been much more, this is new, bring it on. You know, they've done education, and this is a whole new way of doing it. So it's kind of interesting that teachers start off from, I know how to do this, now let's see what else it can do. But people who've been out of learning for a while say, I know about that, let's go straight into. And they kind of cross on the way back. So, you know, if we really are in a world of lifelong learning, and people watching this are going to be, you know, 404 probably one day, yeah. You know, in a world of lifelong learning, let's try everything. You can't do that very easily in an Oda Neal classroom with Crittall windows, you know.
Equality and equity, they're big words in education. How do you see something like Universe really contributing to that conversation?
Well, that's a really interesting question, because, again, early days of computing, I remember we were working with a group of children who were profoundly physically impaired. They'd been, today they probably wouldn't have been allowed to be born. You know, they were in a right old pickle. And there was something about working with others online that anonymised all their disadvantages. And they could imagine that they were just as everybody else. Now, the trouble with that is there's something unique about them. They have a culture, they have a way of seeing the world. Of course, what you can do in that virtual space is, you know, full-bodied people without those problems can now be those people. What's it like to be in a wheelchair all the time? What's it like to be partially sighted? We can reverse it. So we can build empathy. And empathy is a great way of building value. I mean, I'm a BAFTA judge, so I get to judge all the movies, you know. When we give out awards for cinematography, best framing, you know. We very rarely give them to people who've got any kind of literacy, you know. They're very often, you know, they were profoundly dyslexic, and because of that, they don't see the world in linear notation. They see the world in totality, you know. So it's nice to value what other people can do, rather than say, well, you're not very good at reading, let's intervene and see if we can patch you up. And I think a virtual world is one where it's much easier to value the things people can't do and the unique perspectives they have. And of course that extends right down to positive, to poverty and ethnicity and all those other things as well. We can be others. Kids love role-playing, absolutely love role-playing. So it's a lovely space to authentically role-play. And why wouldn't we do that? Why wouldn't we?
And the first time you saw Universe, what was that initial view and how has that changed?
Well, I'd kind of take you back to the first time you saw Avatar, because people watching this conversation, well, you probably watched Avatar, but you haven't had to go with Universe. You should, it's good. But when you watch that, first of all, the movie started with just regular people, the guy in a wheelchair, and they're the movie, and then they kind of go off into this new world. And you think, when are we going to get back to the story? You know, by the time it ends, you've fallen into the whole virtual world, and it's become your universe. And it's quite annoying when you go back to the reality of life for a few moments towards the end of the film. I think you can see that's what this is starting to feel like. When I first saw it, it was, oh, that's a funny old avatar, that's a funny old space. But very quickly, when you start doing learning in there, you think about the other advantages. When we had lockdown, kids were in their homes in different contexts. I'm building a school in Peru, and the kids were told to stay indoors for 6 months. Weren't allowed out of the flat for 6 months. Well, you're living with 3 other kids and an abusive stepfather, that's not a good place to be. Other kids had the time of their life. I live by the sea, my kids are on the beach, having a lovely time. But the ability to step into somebody else's world for real, is pretty powerful. It's in a way, it's learning without limits. I've never met a teacher in my life who didn't want their kids to be their best possible selves and the best possible chance. Teachers are wonderfully ingenious. They've managed to make teaching happen with almost no resources, and they've done remarkable things. The minute they saw somebody else doing something, oh, I could do that. And they're full of bright ideas. So, but the time thing is never a problem when the children have engagement and agency. When you say to the kids, oh, how's this going to work? How can we try this? What are the pros and cons? What happens if we all decide to be 7 foot tall? In here, how's that going to feel? The kids will do that. We had a school in Barcelona, which famously, we gave the kids a lot of cardboard and said, model the school of the future. And they had a cardboard interactive screen. Don't tell the boss, Cardboard iPads, cardboard everything, And we said, build, future learning. And they built it all in cardboard, but it was better. They did better. They were more engaged. They arrived earlier because they were role-playing future learning. They give them a tool to role-play, and they're off. Teacher doesn't have to do that. You just got to open the door and let them go.
If you had to sum it up, how would you describe Universe to maybe a new teacher or to a senior leader?
Senior leaders are good too. I used to have 23,000 of them online in talking heads, and they were so full of good ideas particularly about technology. It was interesting, But I think I'd sum it up very simply by saying what happened back there in COVID was that learning escaped. It kind of got out of the boxes we'd put it in. It stopped being 9 till 3. It stopped being in a room full of... It's a bizarre thing, to be in a room with 30 other children where the only thing you've got in common is you're born between 2 Septembers, or to be sat down with 1,000 other teenagers and the school says, right, you will be simultaneously hungry. All 1,000 of you are going to be hungry right now. And the bizarre things that we do. And learning, having escaped from all that, needs vehicles to travel in on that journey of escape. This is one of them. This is absolutely one of them. And if I was ahead, both my daughters run schools, one on the beach and one at lovely, stunning school, just been nominated School of the Year, down on the south coast, They're bursting with imagination. They've got wonderful teams around them. And they just need good tools, to get on with it.
And I guess finally, for the audience and for yourself, what are some of the initial learnings from the start of the research that I know you're looking at?
Yeah, they're
of Universe.
They're pretty clear, and at this point, I'd put them all down as hunches rather than, data findings. But I'll tell you what, we're never wrong with the hunches. So trust what you hear. And the first thing is children find it fresh. This is different. And we've been trying to put the genie back in the bottle after COVID. And as you know, there were something like 2 million children not attending regularly this side of COVID. The number of children being home educated gone up by 40%. And they don't want to go back in the bottle. So here's another place they can go. So they find it fresh. And that's a universal. I think second thing, girls are really interested in, who else can I be? I mean, my 6-year-old is interested in, who else can she be? She's way past princesses. She's a pirate now, but who else can I be in my learning? Is a really interesting question. And how does that enhance and add to my learning? And of course I can parachute in role models of all sorts. It's an open door. And thirdly, really, nobody's said, oh, this is vastly expensive, because it isn't. You know, there's been some pretty expensive technology thrown into learning over the years. I used to drive around with a barcode projector in the back of my van that cost more than the van. In the grand scheme of things, this is pretty good value. You know, if I go to country, I'm working, doing policy in Vietnam and Cambodia and Indonesia, the Philippines at the moment, and none of them ever says how much is it. They just say, what else can we do to invest in children? And this is a very cost-effective way of investing in children, kind of opening a door to a whole new world of learning. Plus, it's really good fun. I'm enjoying it.
Thank you. And anything else you'd like to add as we...
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's one big thing, and if you'll be watching this at a trade show or somewhere, you know, this never stops. It accelerates. And, you know, we're kind of, here we are in the wealthy West, and I'm not quite Kashmir, but Peter Suit's very grand, you know. We have stability, we have finance, we have opportunity. And what we have to do with it is show how good learning can be for people who can have a lot less than us. If I'm in Kashmir, 25 million kids, no teachers, we're not going to find 1 million teachers. So we need to find ways that technology can make learning better now for people who are having a really bad time. And that's a moral imperative for us. So whatever else you do, give it a go and save the world. What can I tell you?
Thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure.
And any questions, feel free to reach out and contact us.
Yeah, you know where I'm online. I'm all over the place, you know.
Okay.
Just type in Heppell, you'll find me.
Brilliant. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your time, Stephen.